final session of our webinar series called Advancing Nature-Based Solutions to Address Climate Change in Asia-Pacific region. Over the past months, we have explored different dimensions of NBS. The first webinar focused on the policy planning, second examined technical implementation approach, and third highlighted monitoring and evidence building. Today's webinar, in our conclusion session, we will have a critical questioning of financing and how we can mobilize resources and partnership to bring NBS to scale. First of all, I would like to thank to our co-organizers, ESCAP, IUCN, Nature for Climate, and NDC Partnership, and IGES, RCC Asia Pacific, as well as participants for you and you to contribute into this important exchange. Before we begin, I would like to point out a few quick housekeeping notes. During the webinar, please keep your microphones off, and this session is being recorded. Also, there will be a Q&A session following the country examples panels. And we encourage you to engage actively through the chat box. If you post a question, please indicate which speakers your question is directed to. Also, we are using, to be more interactive, we are using Slido polls during the session. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Slido, but it's similar to the more common Menti. Please keep your devices, your phones ready. There will be some QR codes and links, and we will share between slides and let you know. And then you can participate, and we can have a wider participation. With that, let us begin with the program. Without further ado, I'm pleased to invite Ms. Fatin Tevfik. She's a program officer at Climate Finance Unit, UNFCCC Secretariat, to deliver her opening remarks. And Ms. Tevfik, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here for the final part of this webinar series. I did have a few slides, if those could be loaded, please. But so in essence, I wanted to focus my brief remarks on some reflections drawn from the UNFCCC process that I hope provides a big picture framing ahead of the more granular details and case studies that the other speakers will offer, zooming in on the Asia-Pacific region. And I have three key messages. So next slide, please. First, there is clearly increasing momentum behind nature-based solutions and finance for nature-based solutions in the UNFCCC process. So this is not a comprehensive history by any means, but just some selected illustrated milestones that I think help demonstrate this. So from the inception of the convention up to the Paris Agreement, of course, the regime predated the idea of nature-based solutions as formulated as such. But there were, of course, closely related concepts always in there, like forests, land use, ecosystems, sinks and reservoirs, and so on. It's in 2018, actually, that we get the first explicit mention of nature-based solutions in a UNFCCC decision. It was in the decision on the guidelines for the biennial transparency reports under the UNFCCC, specifically on what parties should report in their voluntary adaptation chapters. This also happened to be my first COP and the first negotiation I supported, and I vividly remember discussions with the co-facilitators about whether the concept of nature-based solutions was legitimate enough or mature enough to include in a decision under the UNFCCC. Obviously, the decision was yes, that it was. And then that's where things really start to pick up. So in 2019, the Standing Committee on Finance decided to host their next forum on the topic of finance for nature-based solutions, which then took place over 2021 and 2022. Then in 2023, we see the inclusion of nature-based solutions explicitly, as well as closely related concepts, very prominently featured in two of the landmark decisions from COP28. That is the outcome of the first global stocktake and one of the targets of the Global Goal and Adaptation Framework. in 2024, last year's biennial assessment of climate finance flows prepared by the Standing Committee on Finance, we see nature-based solutions recognized as an emerging theme of interest in relation to finance. And one example from this year is that nature-based solutions, including in relation to finance, have been very prominently featured in the updated NAP technical guidelines. So again, very much increasing momentum and recognition of the value of nature-based solutions and the importance of financing them. So next slide, please. But in order to realize the vast potential of nature-based solutions, we need to tackle several key gaps and challenges in connection with finance that have been identified, including in relation to the prior work of the Standing Committee on Finance. This includes the overall scale of and access to finance, with needs specific to nature-based solutions having been estimated in the hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Also integrating the value of ecosystem goods and services into economic and financial systems, and also developing a business case for investing in nature and ecosystems, including establishing cash flow generating business models. There's also policy and market uncertainty in this area, which can hinder private sector investment. There's a lack of reliable and verified data on nature and climate, including for assessing investment risks and challenges associated with nature-related financial disclosure. And there's also other structural challenges specific to NBS. So for example, in the work of the SCF, they noted that identifying collateral for finance, especially in relation to land and water resources managed by local communities and Indigenous peoples, is an issue. Also, the contested land, ocean, and forest tenure of these groups can undermine NBS efforts. But next slide, please. Luckily, on the flip side, there are also many opportunities and levers of change that have been identified that offer clearer entry points to action. So at the international level, that includes strengthening partnerships and networks for NBS, including to facilitate the exchange of information and lessons learned. And this webinar is a prime example. Also, better aligning bilateral support with development and climate priorities of recipient countries in relation to NBS. MDBs can leverage public climate finance for NBS to de-risk private investments, promote innovation, and also at the multilateral climate fund level, they can support large-scale NBS projects and programs, de-risk also private sector investments, and provide expedited access. And then at the national level, some ideas that have been identified, including giving clear policy signals by integrating climate and nature into national development strategies and climate plans, coordinating across levels and sectors in relation to NBS, promoting the use of instruments such as nature or climate bonds or co-investment schemes for NBS, and also playing a facilitative role in different areas, including reducing the time and costs associated with generating data, encouraging the participation of local and Indigenous actors in safeguarding their rights and land tenure, and creating regulatory frameworks and incentives for scaling up private sector investment in NBS, recognizing that so far approximately over 80% of funding for NBS has come from the public sector. So there's a huge potential in attracting private investment. But the good thing is that several countries in the Asia-Pacific region have already demonstrated clear leadership in these areas, which we'll hear a lot more about today. So I'll leave it there, and thank you again.
Thank you, Fatin, for this insightful presentation. It is actually quite interesting to hear that 80% of MBS is coming from the public sector. It's interesting to know. Before we move forward, let's open the first slide of question that you're seeing actually a QR code on the screen. Please scan the QR code with your phone and let us know which stakeholder group best describes you. It is a live pool, so we usually have a diverse group of participants, of course, in these webinars. from the government officials, development partners, NGOs, academia, sometimes even private sector. I'll give it like a minute to for everyone to join. It's great to see that we have a lot of development partners and donors participation, which is the most important for a finance webinar. Okay, for the sake of time, it is maybe enough. So it's great to see the strong participation again from donors and governments and academia and even private sector, showing the diversity of all actors is needed for NBS. Now we can move on to the next presentation, which will look into the financing landscape for NBS in Asia Pacific. I am pleased to invite Ms. Shizuka Onishi, Senior Program Officer in the Blended Finance Business and Nature team at IUCN, to share her insights. Ms. Shizuka, floor is yours.
Thank you, Sertaj. I hope you can hear me. Good
We hear you
afternoon.
perfectly.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to join this webinar. So in my session, I'll talk briefly about the financing landscape for nature-based solutions by drawing on available reports and information to explore what are the current status, what is emerging trends, and globally, and what are the factors driving these momentums, challenges, and I'll then end with a note on some opportunities in the Asia Pacific region, especially. Next slide, please. So just to start by recalling the financial goals and targets under the UNFCCC and CBD. So under the UNFCCC, the countries agreed in COP29 on a new collective quantified goal for climate finance. So those commitments were to triple the climate finance for developing countries to 300 billion per year by 2035, and also by the same year, scale up financing to a total of 1.3 trillion from all public and private sources. Now, if you look at the Convention on Biological Diversity, you may recall that when we agreed on the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework back in 2022, there was a specific goal to mobilize biodiversity finance gap to address the gap by of $700 billion per year. And also, there are several targets within this framework that talks about specifically how this 700 billion would be mobilized. So under the target 18, this is the large bulk of where the finance should be coming from. So there's currently the governments are investing a lot more in incentive and subsidies are harmful to biodiversity. So reducing that by 500 billion per year. And then target 19 also talks about increasing financial flows from all public and private sector by at least 200 billion per year, including funding flow to developing countries to 30 billion by 2030. And then there's additionally a target 14, which doesn't speak about the financial targets specifically. Nevertheless, this is closely related because it calls on integrating biodiversity values into policies, regulations, and planning and development processes. Next slide, please. So let's look a little bit more into what we are talking when we talk about this financing needs. And these slides are drawn from the 2023 report. You can go back to the slide, previous slide, please. So yes, that one. Yeah, thank you. So these slides are from UNEP's 2023 report on the state of finance for nature. So this actually shows what are the breakdowns of those financial needs. And if you look at the left table, the left figure, you can see financial needs by types of intervention that we need in terms of the nature-based solutions. And by the way, this this graph is based on finance needs for all the Rio conventions. The Rio conventions are the UNFCCC Biodiversity Convention and the Desertification Convention. So if you look at the colors in the left slide, figure, the top blue part shows conservation and protection actions, which represents relatively limited financing needs, about 20% due to its cost-effective nature. And then the middle green parts represents the sustainable land management, so sustainable use of agricultural land, coastal lands, and then the bottom reddish part showing the restoration of degraded land. So you can see that the green and red are actually represents the majority of financing needs between now and 2050. The right-hand side shows where should the money come from. So if you look at the colors, as my previous speaker said, majority is currently coming from green, which is the public finance, and it would still be doing the heavy lifting in the coming years, but also looking at the orange part, which is additional private finance. So you can see that the private finance is expected to play a much greater role. And this is especially true with the sustainable land management intervention, because it essentially is a production activity, agricultural activity, which would generate returns. Next slide, please. So the good news is that we are seeing increasing private investor interest. So there are several surveys that backs this, and this is one of them. You can see that the investors are expecting to have much more investment opportunities in nature and biodiversity over the next few years. Next slide, please. So what is driving this positive momentum for financing nature and climate? There are a few interacting factors that are driving this momentum. One is the global policy agendas, the CCC, biodiversity agreement, but also there are calls to at the international level to improve and reform the finance architecture and make it more easier to mobilize public and private finance into SDGs. The second one is the policy and regulatory framework. So as you may have been observing, there's quite a few works undertaken to establish the disclosure mechanisms, finance taxonomy at the global and regional level, but also as we will see, countries are spending efforts to establish their own national strategies, plans, and regulations. We can see also that the private sector, businesses, and finance sectors are making efforts and the progress in disclosing their risks and impacts on nature, and furthermore, establishing net zero or nature positive targets. And the last one is the market mechanisms, which are conducive to driving the capital into nature and climate actions. Carbon credit market is one of them, and then biodiversity credit market also being developed, learning from the lessons from the carbon market. Next slide, please. So in terms of barriers and opportunities, the bulk of global biodiversity and natural capital is actually located in the global south, the emerging markets and developing economies. But actually, the financial regulations would not enable financiers and investors to put their capital in what is perceived as a risky geography or risky businesses. And then there's also lack of policy certainties or lack of data, limited track record of what the investments how it has been successful. So there's these uncertainties and unknowns are driving the risk perceptions. There's also a lack of investment opportunities. Many of the nature-based solutions projects are lacking detailed design or at too early stage or not enough risk revenues. And then there's mismatch between investors' expectations and wanting to get their returns in a shorter time period, and then there's also the scale of projects for investments are too small. So, so there's several opportunities also developing. I'm quite echoing what the UNFCCC colleague already mentioned, but the flip side of barrier means that there's possible actions that we can take. Next slide, please. One of the solutions, or two of the solutions, which IUCN is implementing or partnering with, I've shown in this slide. So on the left-hand side is addressing the lack of investable project pipeline by administering grants to potential projects to reach that investability stage and project design. The other mechanism is the blended finance mechanism, whereby we draw on the public resources from multilateral funds and bilateral donors to mix it with the private finance to make the return more acceptable for investors into nature and climate actions. Next slide, please. So, so just reflecting on the Asia Pacific region, I think there's a lot of opportunities and strengths that we can build on to scale up NBS finance. So there's a clear policy signals and compelling business case that investing in nature would actually contribute to not only to biodiversity and climate mitigation, but also to socioeconomic benefits in this region. There's also financial market actors and corporates and financial institutions, which are quite active. Some of the largest green bonds, blue bonds, sustainability bonds issuers are found in Asia. Also, the majority, almost half of the TNFD adopters are located in Asia, and pension funds, sovereign wealth funds are also looking more increasingly into investing in nature. And then finally, there is regional cooperation, knowledge sharing, the one like this webinar, but also ASEAN and Pacific efforts that are increasingly sharing knowledge and building interoperative architecture for mobilizing finance for nature. So with that, I'll return the mic to Sertaj. Thank you.
Thank you, Shizuka, for painting a clear picture for both opportunities and barriers and the financial landscape, which was interesting. To build on that, let's go to our maybe second slide of question. And the question is, what do you see as the biggest barrier for financing MBS in your country or the region? Please select from the options of your screen. Again, 1 minute to respond maybe. QR code is right there. It's always an interesting question because the barriers can look very different on depending on the context. In some countries, it's about limited access to international finance, or in others, creating investment-ready projects. that private sector can support maybe. Your perspective is important because we get a snapshot of what's really holding back the process in the region. It's important to highlight lack of investment and ready project pipelines is taking a huge votes. It's big votes as much as insufficient domestic budget allocation. Shows the importance of preparedness, and it's not just about the policy or the willingness or the finance. We also need solid pipelines. Okay, I think with that, it's we can now move on. The next, we will hear about the experiences of NDC partnership members in financing nature-based solutions for adaptation and mitigation. I'm happy to invite my dear colleague, Mr. Jesus Alvarado, is from NDC Partnership Climate Finance Hub, to share his presentation. Jesus, floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Sir Dag. I will have, now we will have a conversation a little bit looking into the opportunities for investing in nature, and in particular, the financing of nature-based solutions in adaptation and mitigation actions. So first, maybe important to signal at least 4 key dimensions that we have seen countries that are members of NDC partnership adopting as entry points to drive investments in nature-based solutions. And the very first action that countries are taking is integrating nature-based solutions in their ambition-raising efforts, particularly in NDCs, but now also increasingly in NAPs and LTLETs. And I think this is important as an instrument that can be leveraged by governments, because the integration of nature-based solutions in their NDCs signals high-level, concrete, and countrywide policy commitment to the implementation of nature-based solutions that also, when later on mobilizing blended and private sector finance, this also indicates willingness for the government to undertake actions in the short term, but also in the long term, especially if outlined in the LTLETs. The other very important instrument or entry point that governments are utilizing to drive investment into nature-based solutions is really diving into the detail and creating concrete strategies to move from commitment to action through investment plans and implementation plans. We will have some examples later on, but just to give you a flavor of the 2 other entry points that we have seen countries adopting, is also the importance of developing bankable projects and really doing active resource mobilization efforts. And a little bit building on what other colleagues from IUCN and UNFCCC said, there are several needs that we have received through our engagement with countries, indicating the need for translating high-level targets into concrete bankable projects. So efforts to really work on the early development phase of projects. And also later on, when projects are set up, when feasibility studies are in place, when the full financial design is in place, also there needs to be capacity on the side of the government to advocate for mobilizing resources for these projects. The other important point that we have seen is the element of strengthening capacity, for instance, by creating dedicated teams within the government, for instance, in the Ministry of Finance, to mobilize resources, to track implementation as well, but also on creating enabling environments for mobilizing finance, which includes the use of incentives, fiscal policy to really create opportunities at the sector level and open up investments for particular sectors. Now, how countries are integrating nature-based solutions in their NDCs? Some are reflecting this in their sectoral priorities. For instance, Marshall Island in their latest NDC 3.0 reflected this into the forest sector. Others are looking into the adaptation component of their NDC. For instance, in Maldives, they reflected this related to coastal protection, coral relief, and disaster risk reduction. And as well, other countries are identifying specific initiatives and projects that sometimes have been already initiated, but have also support needs remaining, and surfacing this through the NDC signals clear commitments from the countries to move this agenda forward. One specific example that has actually undergone an investment planning process is Pakistan. So they have identified through their investment plan for their NDC specific projects like the 10 billion trees tsunami project, also Recharge Pakistan and the Protected Area Initiative, that actually make a clear contribution to the NDC targets and are now really identified and prioritized for better resource mobilization. Which leads me to the other points. There is, through this investment planning process, an effort to identify specific financial mechanisms like debt for nature swaps and others that can really help to fund climate action. And the other point that I think it's also important that has been really specified through this planning process is how will they strengthen institutional arrangements and also enabling environments, for instance, through the specification of how the private sector will engage in projects, for instance, related to climate smart agriculture, irrigation systems, specifications regarding the type of incentives that they're planning to use, and some how to also address regulatory barriers that can be hindering further investments in priority sectors. On the basis of this experience and really the successful practices that we have seen across countries, NDC Partnership has been active in developing a series of tools that actually help countries to introduce or to integrate nature-based solutions in their NDC, but also to materialize their commitments through investment planning and developing of finance strategies. For the NDCs, we launched the NDC 3.0 Navigator. That is a tool that helps countries develop investment-ready NDCs. For investment plans, we have launched the online tool of the Climate Investment Planning and Mobilization Framework, and also to help countries bridge the gap between ideas and really technical guidance and support. We have the country engagement process through which countries can come to NDC partnership to request support, and they're matched with the resources and technical expertise and really implementation support from more than 200 members that are under the NDC partnership. So for the NDC 3.0 Navigator, you can access this under ndcnavigator.org, and there you will see actually a specific section related to how to integrate nature-based solutions in their NDCs. And I think the value of this is to really provide a framework through which enough granularity and relevant specificity regarding the investability of NDCs can be achieved, and also integrating these nature-based solutions not only as an ambition-raising effort, but also as something that can be useful for later on resource mobilization. And the other point that I also wanted to mention is our journey to develop what we call now the Climate Investment Planning and Mobilization Framework. This tool, the Climate Investment Planning and Mobilization Framework, actually builds on efforts undergone by the reform of the GCF readiness program. And actually the partnership between the two institutions led to, on the one hand, joint efforts to devise better planning processes that leads to projects that are bankable, but at the same time, not only projects that are attractive to mobilize investment from the traditional public sector funds and blended finance funds, but also from the private sector. The key features of this framework include really building off existing efforts and governance arrangements, which oftentimes it's important to emphasize this point because oftentimes countries have in place institutional arrangements that can be utilized and not actually start from scratch to move their investment planning process forward. Also, there is an emphasis on coordination and implementation mechanisms. For instance, there's a lot of emphasis on the role that ministries of finance can play in utilizing their convening power and their role in managing the budget and planning processes to really coordinate with different line and sector ministries to better align with the complexities that, for instance, projects related to nature-based solutions can involve, oftentimes linking the mandates of agriculture ministries, forest ministries, among others. And also, there is a lot of emphasis on the value of evidence-based decision-making and the use of, for instance, specific scientific evidence like climate risk and vulnerability analysis in the investment planning process. Also, there's a lot of emphasis on a heuristic approach to resource mobilization and are really a basis for utilizing the work of or the support provided through NDC partnership and the GCF. And that can be evidenced by looking at the 6 stages that this frameworks unpacks, including a specific level related to the components to achieve or steps to achieve each of the objectives or outcomes under each stage, and the support that can be requested. If you see the last line here, the support that can be requested by NDC partnership, by the community of members that collectively provide support on finance-related topics to countries. So this really goes from the first stage related to investment planning and mobilization capacity. So everything on institutional arrangements, stakeholder engagement, mainstreaming climate goals into planning processes and really creating the capacity, for instance, in ministries of finance, and also monitoring and reporting. The other stage, the next stage related to identification and prioritization of investment needs is also a really important point because it emphasizes the use of evidence-based or the use of evidence to inform the identification of needs, and the use of thorough methodologies for prioritizing identified needs, and also the importance of really connecting NDCs, NAPs, and LTLEDs to really, make especially projects related to nature-based solutions make more financial sense from the point of view that oftentimes for these projects to see return, you need to have a long-term approach that also has specified how to mobilize and how to start financing at an early stage. The other point, there is a lot of detail regarding the development of financing strategies. And when it comes to finance mobilization, we actually have 3 stages that specify how to mobilize finance for public and blended sources, or how to utilize blended and public finance for the implementation of NDC goals and climate goals. And also there's a lot of detail regarding how to not only think about mobilizing finance for projects, but shift financial flows from brown to green sectors, and especially priority sectors outlined in their NDCs. So resources that have been launched include the online platform and a dedicated menu of supplements that are actually diving into thematic areas that have been flagged as relevant by the consultations that we conducted to develop the framework. And regarding the specific supplements that we have actually launched, we have an investment planning supplement to our framework related to blue carbon ecosystems. Another one that the blue carbon ecosystem supplement, actually we did with an organization called Pew. The supplement for investment planning related to food system was a joint work between NDC Partnership, WRI, and IFAT. And there is also another supplement related to adaptation investment planning that will be that is being produced between NDC Partnership, Asian Development Bank, and the Commonwealth. So with this, I invite you to stay connected and continue the conversation. Over to you, Sertak.
Thank you, Jesus, for the concrete insights on how financing can be integrated into national policies. So let's take one more slide, though. This is the last one. On the screen, you will see the QR code again. The question is, which financing approach do you think holds the most potential to scale up NBS in Asia Pacific? Please share your thoughts with us. This is a timely question because it's around the region. We see different approaches being tested, of course. Governments allocating more of their national budgets or to countries tapping multilateral climate funds, especially like GCF, GEF. Responses will give us a sense of where the momentum is strong, actually. And yes, as expected, the momentum is on the blended finance models or innovative instruments like green bonds, carbon markets. Yeah. Maybe we can move on. Thank you for active participation on this. Now we turn to country perspectives. For the next session, I would like to hand the floor to my colleague Hanif from IUCN, who will moderate the country examples panel. Hanif, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sartak, and thank you very much also for our previous speakers, Fatin, Shizuka, and Jesus, for setting the context, and they were very insightful to understand the finance on the NBS. We will now move into our country experience panel, which focuses on how countries are mobilizing finance for nature-based solutions, moving from policy commitments to investments. This session is designed to highlight practical examples of how governments in Asia are addressing financing barriers, whether through mobilizing domestic budgets, tapping into international climate funds, or creating conditions for private sector participation and innovative models. We are fortunate to have with us today representatives from India, Dr. Anil, and also from Mongolia, Tamir, who will share their country experience and lessons learned. And I believe this experience will help us better understand how commitment under NDCs and NAPs can be translated into investment-ready pipelines that deliver mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. I'd like to also remind you, if you have any questions for our speakers or panelists, please put them in the chat box. We'll try our best to answer them. And if we still have time later, we'll also try to have our speakers and panelists to answer them. With that, let us begin with our first speaker, Dr. Anil Kumar Gupta, professor and principal investigator at ICARS, also IIT Roorkee. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Dr. Anil, the time is yours.
Thank you. First of all, my compliments to the team for putting up this effort to organize this series of webinars. I, along with my team, are very happy to be the part of this initiative jointly with IUCN and the partners. While today we are talking about the finance for NBS in terms of the promoting investments. So from India's experience, and yes, not only limited to India, but few other countries also, what I say that NBS is not only about a kind of a charity. It is a basic imperative, and this is important because the promoting investment is not about only money, but it is about putting it as a priority, as a focus. So I would request to be on the second slide. So what is important that the India's experience past 20 years or so, the NBS has got a significant place in the policy environment. And now there is a good clarity with a number of pilots also on promoting nature-based solution. But what is important that NBS is not yet a common stream of investment. So how to do that? I think there are windows that exist. For example, the sectoral planning, also the disaster risk reduction related, because the term ecosystem approach to DRR, eco-DRR, that started almost 16 or 17 years back, recognizing the NDS implications for reducing the risk of disasters, more particularly about the climatic extremes. So that is a gap area that, despite of the windows, what are the clear pathways to promote investment and to be sure that the investment repay? Second thing, there are multiple channels. So channels exist, but the guidelines are not adequate. We have a huge funding mechanisms for disaster risk reduction, where there are opportunities for promoting the investment for NBS. But since there are the weaknesses in terms of clarity, then infrastructure, all will believe, will agree that we need to transform the infrastructure development to greener infrastructure and by integrating natural infrastructure. How do we do that in enabling our projects? That is a gap area. Urban systems, health system, these two systems also have a clarity that we need to promote NBS, but how to do that? There are the good models. If we look, those are scanty. So this is very important, that the recent initiative of Government of India, that is the revised National Biodiversity Strategy of 2024. Now this mechanism has been put on to come up with demonstrable models, to come up with the prototypes and the project development guidelines also. And these has also been discussed during India's contributions to UNCCD as well as the G20 presidency. Now India is developing its national adaptation plan, and the NBS comes through various windows. 9 sectors are there in national adaptation plan, but NBS has at least 5 or more sectors have considered NBS to be an important dimension. Next, please. Next slide. Yeah. So I am quoting some examples. Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme is one of the largest employment support system program globally. And there has been good initiatives because the ecological activities have also been listed as livelihood of the payment for work approach in Manrega. And one example in Kerala that has been done, that utilizing Manrega for promoting ecosystem-based approach to DRR. And then other version of Manrega, that is the urban Manrega. So for urban poor employment guarantee. So that has been a successful model among many others. Then another model that we often talk about, the mangrove habitat promotion under a program called MISTI. So almost 30% of India's land, particularly on the coastal side, the mangrove restoration, that has been a great example of the investment to promote NBS. Then not only from the government window, but the private sector windows are also coming forward. There are several private bodies, for example, Tata's, JSW, Apollo, DCM. They have entered into this endeavor jointly with the government bodies. So many of those are like public-private partnership, including some jointly with the local urban administrations. Now, we also have in past 10 years some good examples of utilizing National Adaptation Fund, some good projects in some states like Rajasthan, Telangana, Maharashtra on restoration of degraded landscape through under the funding through this. And the other international funding also, for example, GCF and JEF funding have also been explored. Some examples from Gulf of Mannar and the place of Pichavaram, both in Tamil Nadu, promoting the coastal restoration, coastal eco restoration and mangroves. Then this PK or VY is the Prakritik Krishi, is natural farming. So within agriculture also this revolution is coming forward, and there are some prospective farmers and subgroups which are undertaking this. Next, please. So coming to the last slide, what is a greater gap that we have observed, that NBS has occupied significant space in academic and policy domain, as well as the talking about NBS has also skewed a little bit more towards emotional eco-conservation approach or activism. While I would strongly advocate that we require a much more balanced approach in promoting NBS investment, and that would be a more professional and science-driven approach. Because it is also important that when we want to promote NBS and put in investment in NBS, we should also have a clarity on the long-term benefits of NBS interventions, including, for example, the species selection. Second thing, the limitation of the investment in NBS is also associated with the low confidence, particularly on the short and medium term gains. So there has to be a strong approach, a strong focus on the valuation of ecosystem services in the monetary terms, and that would be very important, monetary as well as the social benefit terms, very clearly demonstrable. And then we need to work on improving guidelines and the procedural case studies so that people have the capacity and the examples to come up with the projects, because there are some good windows of finances available. Now, the India is working on the 16th Finance Commission. That will be for a 5-year period. There has been significant funding for disaster risk management, and that is going to increase in the next 5 years period also. But how do we use that mitigation component, disaster mitigation component, for promoting NBS would require clear demonstrable models as well as the clear guidelines to develop the projects in a time effective manner. Similarly, the sectors for ecosystem approach, biodiversity, and National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change, those funding are also going to increase. There also we will need this kind of guidelines. Then the sectoral windows are also, we did some research that how various sectors funding can be utilized for National Adaptation Plan, and we did an exercise that how much funding would be required for implementing National Adaptation Plan. Under that, there is a good opportunity, but we need to have a clear-cut mechanism for promoting the investment, and also available finance. How do we utilize that? That is even more important. And then corporate leadership. So in order to motivate corporate engagement in promoting investment for NBS, not only CSR, but looking at NBS as a business case or the business opportunity, I think that is something we need to look very serious into, because corporate interest would not only be for CSR. Second thing, corporate sustainability reporting and corporate sustainability mechanism. In India, around 85% of bigger corporate houses are reporting their sustainability, but NBS seldom gets in a adequate space in the sustainability domain. And the last thing, how do we integrate NBS investment in advancing the city planning, so and industries, and also, for example, like big malls are coming. Can we promote the concept of eco-smart malls? There are some concepts globally available, but we need to promote in India also, so that this investment becomes an integral part of the business investment. Next, please. So, and thank you. And this final word from me would be that while we have to move on the economic path of progress, we need to integrate NBS, and it should be made an integral part of the overall business strategy. So I would say that middle path is the way to wisdom, what is Lord Buddha always preaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anil, for insightful presentation, sharing India's experience on how to tap into windows of opportunity for NBS investment, such as through disaster risk reductions or eco-DRR, which is also part of NBS. And another way is to utilize urban investment and business investments to align them with NBS. And thank you for also showing us several successful case studies on India's approach, demonstrating how a mix of instruments can be combined to mobilize resources for NBS. Thank you again, Dr. Anil. Now we are moving on to second speaker, Tamir and Amgalan. I hope I pronounced it correctly again. NDC Partnership in Country Facilitator Mongolia. Tamir, the time is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Anif. I hope you can hear me clear.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, great. Good day, colleagues, distinguished colleagues. It's my pleasure to present Mongolia's experience in mobilizing finance for nature-based solutions from commitment to investment. I'm Tamir, NDC Partnership in Country Facilitator for Mongolia. This presentation was originally supposed to be delivered by our colleague Mukbat, who is a senior analyst on climate change on the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. But unfortunately, due to urgent government commitment, he is not able to join for us this session today. So I will present you the key findings and the experience in Mongolia. Next slide, please. Yeah, I want to start my presentation by why nature-based solutions as a cornerstone of Mongolia's NDCs, NAP, and affiliates. Because just like most of our neighboring countries, the colleagues, Mongolia faces severe climate pressures. For example, almost 77% of Mongolian territories already witnessed severe land degradation and desertification. And the average air temperatures increased 3 times higher than a global average. And the frequency of natural disasters are keep increasing year by year. And we also have a really low amount of groundwater, underground water, but we are using like almost 90% of our water supply from the groundwater, but the available surface water is almost 98%. Also, as for the forest cover, it's only 8% of comparing to the total territory of Mongolia, and the total precipitation is keep increasing. But the problem is we do have a harsh winter in Mongolia, but the precipitation or heavy snow in the winter time is keep increasing, while this the actual rain water we need during plant growing season is keep decreasing. So that's why natural-based solutions are not optional. They are cornerstone of Mongolia's climate commitments, such as NDCs and NAPs and so on. So next slide, please. Yeah, source of finance. To mobilize finance, Mongolia relies on several key sources. These include state budget, where at least 1% of GDP is commitment to green development, tax, incentive policies, international climate funds, like our colleagues mentioned earlier, GCF, GAF, additional mechanisms like public-private partnership, local government financing, and also green procurements. But challenges remain. Most climate projects so far have focused mostly on the energy sector, while nature-based solutions has not received enough financing. We also lack of carbon registry, meaning we cannot yet track how much emissions have been reduced or avoided. Without stronger frameworks, private sector engagement remains limited, for sure. I think we do have a similar structure of financial mechanism in most of the countries. If we move on to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, to address these gaps, Mongolia developed green taxonomy in 2019 and SDG taxonomy in 2033. These taxonomies provide unified definition and classifications of eligible green activities and technologies covering different sectors and technologies. Aligning nature-based solutions with this taxonomy will help us attract sustainable financing, both from domestic and international investors. And the next slide, please. We just submitted our revised NDCs a couple of days ago. So in this slide, you are seeing the previous NDC. Our ambition was 22.7 reduction by 2030. And also last year we finalized and approved by the National Climate Committee this National Adaptation Plan until 2030. And we have different sectors, targets, and the interventions. And as for the natural-based solutions, we are like more focusing on rangelands management, forestry, water, biodiversity, livelihood, and so on. And next slide, please. And what we learned from the past is we have national documents, but the thing is we have different ecosystems, different landscapes. In the northern part, there's high mountains, glaciers, and the deep forest, but in the southern part, we have a Gobi Desert. So we have this transition zone. So each province has a different natural conditions. So that's why we need this kind of subnational climate action plans for each provinces. So since 2023, we developed this region-specific climate action plans, and as of today, if I'm not mistaken, 6 of the provinces already approved the finalized this action plan. So we do need these region-specific nature-based solutions. For example, for a surface water harvesting, it was like unwise to do it in the Gobi region because there was no water supply to feed this harvesting pond. So that's why the quality of this water was not even suitable for the livestock watering. So that's why what we learned in the past, we are trying to finalize these province-specific action plans by the next year, and hopefully we will achieve this. And each of the nature-based solutions will be implemented in the upcoming years. Next slide, please. Yeah, have to spend our donors support efficiently. That was the key topic, even from this topic, in my opinion. So, implementing such a project, I just want to highlight. It's like the good example in Mongolia. Most of the projects are trying to adapt this financial mechanism. This is we call three-way collaboration. For example, if the donor is funding 70% and the local government, it's not from the state budget, it's from the local government budget, they are willing to cover 30% of it. But how we should continue this, what we already invested is we should collaborate with the beneficiaries. For example, in Mongolia, mostly the herders and the farmers. The key concept is beneficiaries should be protectors because in the past, once the project is completed, there's no ownership. So that's why all this like it was like abandoned. Like the local the herders, they were competing for the well or this harvested areas. So this is how we are trying to make the efficient work by collaborating with the beneficiaries and also ownership for the local government as well as for the donors. Uh, Next slide, please. So this is one of the example from one of the biggest GCF-funded climate change adaptation project in Mongolia being implemented by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change and the UNDP, as well as the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. So when we trying to make the site selection, starting from the site selection, we try to identify what's the actual risk and vulnerability in the field. So here you can see the example of one of the eastern province called Tornot in Mongolia. We use the available data both from the satellite data and what we have from the Institute of Meteorology and Land Agency and so on. So once we collected all this data, next slide please. We ranked the actual vulnerability of the SOM level. SOM is the smaller unit, administration unit of the province. So we ranked what's the actual vulnerability, the risks are in the smaller SOM level by using the climate change and future trends and the drought and Zod is the harsh winter in Mongolia. Can you imagine like minus 40 Celsius degree? The national disasters are causing a lot of issues for the herders. and also the pasture carrying capacity, because even though we are only 3.5 Mongolians, we have almost 110 sheep unit livestock in Mongolia. So that's why, because of the land degradation and desertification, the pasture carrying capacities keep decreasing year by year. So also we use the heritage vulnerability assessment. It's not just because of how many livestock they got. So if you, the natural disasters happening, even the family with more than 1,000 livestock will face the same issue. So that's why we try to like, how far is the nearest town or city, or how is the water quality, and how good is the infrastructure, how is the like social and the yeah, for example, the insurances and so on. So that's how we like estimated these provinces and sums this average risk and vulnerability for each zone. And next slide, please. And then this is the final, like the planning of like what should we do on the BOG level. BOG is the smallest administration unit in Mongolia. So for example, here we are seeing one of the BOG in a western province. So we have here the blue area is the catchment area. So we already listed what kind of interventions needs to be it's needed there, because we cannot do a lot of afforestation or reforestation in the red zones actually shown saw in the previous slide. So for that's why here it has this catchment area, the blue area is catchment area, and if you see these red polygons, this is the area for these local communities, the herder communities. They have this land, and within this land we are um, like, for example, this small scale water harvesting structure and so on. Because we are talking about nature-based solutions, we are not referring to the really huge engineering infrastructure. So this is really small water harvesting pond, just enough for this one or two neighboring herder communities. And also this reforestation, because in the catchment area it's really crucial to have this catchment area forest, and also afforestation and the pasture management and so on. And also one big issue is natural spring protection. For example, in this park we are already planned three natural spring protection, which we will see the next slide, please. Oh yeah, this is the catchment area reforestation site in the eastern part of Mongolia. So Mongolia initiated 1 billion national movement in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So as of 2024, we already planted more than 50 million trees. And the thing is, what to plant and where to plant, and what about the nursery, the plants, and so on. So that's why we actually prepared for this national movement, because planting 1 billion trees, like it's a really huge work. So that's why we spend a lot of time and effort for the planning stages, where to plant and what to plant, and who's gonna be responsible for nursing at least 3 or 4 or 5, even 5 years. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is another good example why I was saying protecting the natural spring is really important in Mongolia, because in the first picture in 2022, you are seeing one of the natural spring in the western part of Mongolia called Hover. But the problem is every day more than 20,000 livestock gather on this spring just for watering, because within a 10 or 20 kilometers radius there is no water source for the animals to water. So that's why it has a really huge pressure, physical pressure from the livestock. So when we were trying to make this fence, it was really difficult, because every this within a 100, even 100 meter, it was like absolutely heavy degraded, no vegetation cover and so on. So the water quality was very bad. And then we tried to create this environmental friendly way to fence this important spring. So since we are talking about protecting the nature, we don't want to like dig ground and put like tons of cement in it. So that's why we try to have this environmental friendly way. It's like a triangle shaped fence without any like further interrupt in the soil and so on. So just within 2 years, this spring becomes like almost a small pond. So this is like one of the good nature-based solutions we are referring. Now it's like scaling up, like hundreds of springs are being protected with this similar technology. I mean, defense and all over Mongolia. Next slide, please.
Hi, Tamir. Sorry to remind you, you have 2 minutes left.
Okay. I think I have just 2 more slides. To ensure long-term stability, Mongolia has drafted climate change law. This law established framework for sustainable finance, transparency, sectoral coordination. It defines roles and responsibilities, promotes research and capacity building, creates the database and even the MRV and the greenhouse gas inventories. It also includes the domestic carbon market aligned with the international standards. This legal foundation will make nature-based solution finance more predictable and attractive for both public and private investors, we hope. Next slide, please. Yeah, to conclude my presentation, I just want to highlight that making a bankable nature-based solution requires standardized project documentation, clear KPIs, and a strong revenue logic, whether through carbon, water, ecotourism, or avoid the losses. We also need the de-risking tool, blended finance, and a transparent MRV system. Mongolia is already combining public budget, climate funds, and the private finance, but the next opportunities lie in scaling up our green taxonomy, piloting Article 6 with the natural-based solution projects in the forest and rangelands, and strengthening subnational finance. The message is, of course, clear. Nature-based solutions must move from commitments to concrete investments. Next slide, please. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. We invite you all to the upcoming UNCCT COP17, which will be held next year in Mongolia. So, because the land degradation is the biggest environmental issue in Mongolia because of overstocked grazing and the climate change. So this will be opportunity to attract more investors from both from the funds and the public sector. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tamir, for informative presentations. And it is really interesting to see that Mongolia's move to NBS has been organically happened for the concern of threatened resources, and then the introduction of the green taxonomy to attract different scale of financing mechanism to fund NBS interventions, but also the vulnerability map. So investment on NBS can be focused on those areas. Thank you so much, Tamir, for the sharing your presentations. Now we move to the moderated question. I'd like to ask first to Dr. Anil and then to Tamir. Across your experiences, Dr. Anil, what have been the most effective ways to make NBS project investment ready? Are there specific steps or enabling conditions that help translate policy priorities into bankable NBS projects?
Thank you for raising this question. This question is, I think, very important when we really want to boost up NBS related investment. So one thing based on my experience that comes to that the investment in NBS basically need to be very clear cost benefit ratio. So that is very important, because the country, like if I talk about India is an economy in transition. So we have both kind of examples. We have excellent examples also, excellent pilots also, but there are also examples where, because of the ecological degradation or non-respect of the ecological values, the degradation continues, and we are witnessing the disastrous situations also. So in this, what is important that the NBS promotion should also marry with the social aspirations, because social aspirations lead to the political influence. So that's very important. Basically the priorities, if we can relate with the interventions or major initiatives for saving life. So DRR related interventions, then initiatives like promoting employment and livelihood, like the rural employment guarantee scheme I told, it has now an urban version also. Then the third one is very important, that is the health. Now people are growing a little more cautious on the health front, and people are little careful about the protecting their health, particularly in changing climatic the concerns. So if we integrate, so what I am saying that we need to be sure that it has co-benefits as well. And then local economies. The people at local level, while some of the people may be concerned about the national economy or what goes around the world or in the region, but the people are more concerned about the local economies, the issues at the local level. So these are the few things, and in such cases, when the projects are developed, the projects have the better impact at the local level, and better I would say that the returns, because when we say investment, then we need to be sure about the returns as well. So thank you for this question.
Thank you, Dr. Anil, for your answer. And then to Tamir, the same questions. What would be the most effective ways to make NBS project investment ready? If you can answer that in 2 minutes, sorry, if we have limited time now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mongolia. Yeah, we have relied on blended approach for sure. Domestic resources, including government commitment to allocate 1% of GDP, and also there's a provincial level commitments for the climate projects. So these are, because we have a lot of mining, gold, copper, whatever it is in Mongolia. So each income from those mining companies to the state budget, at least 30% of this incomes should be reinvested to protect nature. So this is the main sources. Then the effective way would be, the most effective way would be evidence-based planning for sure, because we need to identify what to do and where's the most vulnerable areas for the herders or farmers, or the high-risk zones I was previously mentioned. Embedding natural-based solutions into national strategies is really important for sure, because it's most of the actions already included in the NAP or NDCs, even LDLEDs. So the effective way would be, we should have a scientifically evidence-based planning. Hopefully we will have, in at least for the early stage. So then investment-ready projects means the backable projects, as a lot of colleagues mentioned. And then, of course, in Mongolia, we should have this legal framework ready, such as this taxonomies I mentioned earlier. Also, once we finalize this climate change law, it would be much easier, both for the investors and the decision makers, from my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samir. And thank you for the panelists. It's very interesting discussion and answers. Like, I would love to ask you more questions, because I'm pretty sure this is a very interesting topic for everyone in Asia Pacific, how to make more investable projects in NBS and how to fund those NBS interventions. But unfortunately, due to limited time, now I have to hand over to Sartak. But thank you again for Dr. Anil and Tamir for joining us. Thank you very much, and hand over to you, Sartak.
Thank you, Hanif, and thanks to our country presenters, Professor Anil and Tamir, for sharing their valuable experiences. As you mentioned, we are almost at the end of the webinar, but to conclude our webinar, I'm now pleased to invite Ms. Aneta Nikolova, Environmental Affairs Officer, Environment and Development Division of ESCAP, to deliver her closing remarks for this webinar. Aneta, floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes?
Perfect. Yes, we do.
Yeah, very good. Well, this was an amazing array of great presentations and giving hope for the future. And thank you very much to all participants for attending and for contributing as well. We've learned that the NPS are rising in importance in the UNFCCC schemes of game, and also with the Article 6 now, with the workbook, it becomes more important. We've learned from our colleagues from IUCN that different financial schemes are important, and I'm very happy to hear that some pension funds are also increasingly investing in nature. That is fantastic. We also learned from our colleagues from the NDC partnership that the new NDCs are more and more addressing the issue of investing in NBS and embracing up. This is an opportunity for better climate action in the region. I would like to thank to our participants and speakers from India and from Mongolia for very insightful presentations, for the clear cut the way forward. What I took the most is the link between the social appreciations, the disaster risk reduction, and the health issues with NBS, the role of that. And then we heard a little bit more on the innovative approaches in Mongolia for dealing with the increasingly water scarcity and water issues that on which the herding depends on. And so with that, I would like to thank to all of you for the great collaboration. This has shown that when partners get together, we can bring value and we can bring more information. And I thank you very much to all the participants. All the materials will be available on the Webinar 4 website for review and for further reference. Thank you very much to all. Sertak, back to you.
Thank you, Aneta, for those thoughtful closing remarks and helping us to conclude today's session on a strong round. On behalf of UNESCAP, IUCN, Nature for Climate, and NDC Partnership, and IGES, RCCI Asia Pacific, I thank all the speakers, panelists, and participants for joining us today. And this concludes our webinar series. Have a nice day.
Ya, udah habis, Rin.
Thank you all. Thank you.